Welcome to the Bootloader. I'm Todd Kurt.
And I'm Paul Cutler. Today we have a special supersized edition of the bootloader for you. Rather than covering a number of topics for 5 minutes, Todd just got back from Supercon, and I've been peppering him with questions about it. So I thought we'd bring some of those questions to the show for those of us like me who couldn't be at Supercon. So with that, Todd, tell us, what is Supercon and where is it held?
All right, so Supercon is the long name is the Hackaday Super Conference. Hackaday is a Hackaday.com is a blog that's been around for like 15 years. Originally started, I think, by Phil Terone, now of Adafruit, and its whole purpose was to showcase interesting, cool hardware hacks that are happening in the community. Back in the old days, it was maybe only once a day, but now there's like tons of content. So if you ever want to like learn how to do cool hardware hacking things, from like simple stuff to really complicated things, Hackaday is a really good resource for that. I've learned so much just by reading the website. And so SuperCon is a way of getting a lot of these people that do a lot of this stuff together. Like, hey, let's have a conference of all these cool hacking projects. And this has been, I think maybe this is like the 8th year or something. It's been going on for a while, and it's been held mostly in Pasadena, California, which is just outside of Los Angeles. And there's the reason why it's there is because SupplyFrame, the now owners of Hackaday, their headquarters is in Pasadena, and they've got a SupplyFrame design lab, which is sort of like a hacker space, but it's more like a design studio with really good tools like laser cutters and CNC mills and resin printers and a bunch of other really interesting stuff. Um, and so it's held there, and next door, there's this LA College of Music has a really nice big stage with really good lighting and stuff. And so there's like the main stage, the LA College of Music, is literally right next door, and in the design lab, there's sort of the second smaller stage, and they have talks going on concurrently in both of those. And then in between, in the alley, there is a bunch of tables set up where probably like 100 people can just, and like a bunch of soldering irons and like parts sponsored by DigiKey. We're going to start hardware hacking your things. And so a lot of people will bring their projects that are like in a mostly finished state, and they'll go there and they'll be hacking on things. There's also badge hacking, which we'll talk about in a second. And
That's
then
so
there's
cool. I had no idea that they actually had, soldering irons on site right there where you can actually start hacking on your hardware.
Yeah, it's amazing, and people will bring stuff like this year. I saw a fully functioning Apple II Plus. I saw some weird CPM computer with full CRT monitor. There's just like some really weird ancient stuff that people will somehow just cart to the conference and just set up on these tables, and then they'll start soldering onto it. Some people were setting up Eurorack little synthesizers they were making by themselves, and they integrated the badge into the Eurorack system somehow. It was just crazy, and these people are overall much better engineers than me, I would say. So it's really interesting to see a lot of the stuff people are doing. There's like super high density surface mount soldering going on, that like people bring microscopes so they can like look at the surface mount soldering. It's just insane.
That's amazing. So we hinted at it, but tell me about the badge. So I think it actually started at DEF CON, where they converted badges to actually microcontrollers or circuit boards.
Yeah, I think that's because I find that the fact that we're calling them badges are kind of hilarious, because as someone who loves to go to some of these conferences but have kind of a hard time interacting with people, I really liked the actual badge of a conference, because I could see their name, I could see their name and their face, and I could like kind of get, and then maybe their company, if the badge had the company, so I could have this nice little package that helped me remember this person, because I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. Now, what are badges? Now, badges are special purpose microcontroller boards that are designed for the event. They're a one-time created thing. They're more of an art piece than a product. And with a lot of these badges, you're expected to modify the badge on site during the 3 days of the conference. This is the way DEF CON works. This is the way SuperCon works. And there's other conferences that have similar things. This year's badge looks like this.
We'll
If you're
include a
watching,
picture of that in the show notes.
if you're watching on the video, I mean, kind of off the slide a little bit. So it is a recreation in a way of the old computers from like the 70s, where you had to, there was like before keyboards and screens, you had dip switches and lights. And so the way you keyed in the program is you flipped the various switches that indicated the bits of the command and the bits of the data, and you flipped the switch that said load, and that would change one memory address, and then you would go to the next memory address and flip the switches, and eventually you would input like 100 or 200 instructions, and then you'd flip the run switch, and your program would run, and the lights would change, and you would see the output. And so that's what this is. It's a recreation of that. It's running on a PIC microcontroller. Um, and some people there were keying instructions on the little like switches that are on the badge by hand. But there's also a serial port, and if you go to the serial port, you can upload via like a bootloader process. You can upload a precompiled uh, sort of machine code thing. And on the event, people were writing web-based compilers for this thing for in various languages and stuff. And so, but like it's got like 30 bytes of RAM. It's got some very small amount, because it is a recreation of these really like initial computers that existed back in the 60s and 70s.
That's pretty cool. Is there one or two badges that you saw that really stood out?
So there's the cleverness of just hacking the badge, of just programming the badge, like just being able to do that. Like I wasn't able to actually really get into the programming, because I did this sort of machine language stuff when I was first learning computers on an Apple II. I don't really want to do that and do that anymore. There's not a nostalgia to it for me. But just people doing some amazing, like I think someone had like a fractal renderer, um written in this machine code, but like one of the best ones, and I think it won the badge hacking contest that happens at the end of the event, was Zach, and I forget who, two longtime Hackaday community members made a barcode reader for the not a barcode, what do you call them, a punch card reader, for as a way to input programs into the badge. And instead of using like extra components, they actually unsoldered some of the LEDs that were on one badge to turn the LEDs into sensors, because LEDs work both ways. They both can emit light and they can sense light. So they had this sandwich of a row of LEDs on one side and a row of LEDs as sensors on the other side. And if you fed paper in between, um, then you could read the dots or gaps or whatever in the punch card feeding through. And so people were writing programs on the punch cards to submit to them so they could run it through their system to load onto their badge.
That's amazing. So you came for the talks, and the talks that are on the main stage have been released to YouTube, or most of them. So we'll link to the ones that we talk about. What was?
That's actually to preface that. So they recorded. So there's two tracks of talks happening simultaneously, and they're both being recorded. The ones in the bigger stage are streamed live to YouTube. So if you can't make it to Supercon next time, I would say go ahead and try to watch the streams live, because it's really good. They've got really good AV setup. They've got multiple camera angles. They've got a switcher that's switching between the slides of the presenter, and that way you can kind of participate on social media with people if you can't make it, because really the only reason why I made it is because I also live in Pasadena.
Sure.
but they did record all the ones, and so there were some really good ones in the design lab stage, the smaller stage, but those weren't streamed. I think they will release those in maybe a month or two, so watch for them as they kind of clean up and make a whole package of all the videos, and I think that's going to come out at some point soon. But anyway, so to continue on.
So as we were preparing for the show, I was watching some of the videos, and if there was one thing I learned was don't judge a book by the cover. A couple of the videos that I would not have watched because of the title, because I just personally didn't find it interesting, you recommended, and I found them to be the best ones of the bunch.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one. Let's talk about the DIY vacuum tubes from Nick.
So Nick Poole is he's like one of the most cyberpunk looking fellows I know. He's got these awesome, like dark black angular tattoos on his face and arms. It just looks amazing. And he's got these cool jackets and clothes that he wears that just makes him look like something out of a movie. It's just amazing. He's a really nice guy. He does sort of like design. Like inventor experimentation at SparkFun, I think. Like he creates some of the new cutting edge stuff that SparkFun does. But he wanted to like I think he was playing around like whimsically wanting to like imagine a world where we kind of missed like we humans missed the boat on semiconductors and started miniaturizing vacuum tubes. And so imagine this world sort of like maybe like in the Fallout universe where we have these surface mount vacuum tubes and we've got vacuum tube computers that are small and fit on your wrist or something. And so he's like, well, what's the smallest vacuum tube I can make? And can I, a normal human, make vacuum tubes? And so we went through this whole sort of journey of what does it take to make vacuum tubes? Turns out it's hard. You know, there's a lot of it's not just pulling a vacuum and putting a glass envelope around it. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And so he made a vacuum tube, a little tiny one, that has a little Hackaday logo inside. It's just beautiful.
His journey was pretty amazing. He reached out to a number of commercial companies who wanted to sell him, lots of thousands of pieces. He's just trying to build a couple, right?
Yeah.
But he was able to get samples, and it was a really interesting story as he went along on that journey.
Agreed. Yeah, he's the one of the most interesting things is that there's some sort of chemical that you put inside the vacuum tube, and when you like energize it or heat it up, that chemical vaporizes and plates onto the electrodes to make them appropriately doped to be the cathode and anode or something. I didn't fully understand it because vacuum tubes, man, there's like this whole level of engineering and physics that we don't really think about much anymore because that was 50 years ago.
So let's talk about electric scooters, which was another kind of a journey talk or presentation that was
Mhm.
given that I found fascinating.
So Bradley Gawthrop, he's on social media as a tall, dark, and weirdo. I think he works with Shaw and Conservify, doing like these really interesting um, uh, environmental sensing platforms that can go out into the rough and tumble world and sense the world in various chemical and environmental ways. But he also is a real big fan of personal electric vehicles or electric scooters, and it's a really interesting journey through the fact that there's a lot of bad actors like the Bird Scooter Company and things that are just like taking this interesting idea of a small electric scooter and polluting our environment with them. just tripping it. Like if you walk down a modern city nowadays, you have to trip over these dang scooters that have been abandoned. But there's all this open source effort to make them usable by normal people, not locked into any one corporation. And there's a single person he talked about that is making open source firmware for these electronic speed controls and all the various like critical electronics to control and deal with the charge of the scooter. And he ended his talk with one of the best sort of call to actions of like this guy doing this open source controller and keeping us so we're not locked in to this the world of Bird, is making a difference. And every one of us in the audience watching that video can make a difference if we just care about one thing enough to to work on it. And so it was very inspirational.
And that was
It's
his
really nice.
message was find a community, join it, and start a fight, as he put it, right? He didn't mean
Yes.
a literal fight, but he's like, get engaged. And
Yes.
it's a great talk. If you do watch it, stick to the end so you can see that piece. You'll learn a lot about
Yes.
personal electric vehicles, a lot of stuff I didn't know. But you're right. That end was just a kicker. It was great.
Yeah, I've never been interested much in scooters, but I do find the study of them interesting because it's this type of electronics. It's like high current electronics that I never deal with. Like all the electronics I deal with are like in the orders of tens of milliamps, and here's like you have to deal with potentially 50 100 of milliamps on these scooters or just any electric vehicle. And it's just a different way of thinking about electronics, which I find really fascinating. And then on top of it, his call to action.
The next one I wanted to ask you about was Sammy's random walk exploration. So I watched the video on this one as well. And he starts off, I'll let you tell the story, but he starts off in one place and ends in another. And it's just a great story.
It's just this delightful effect ended up creating. So it's if you just look at if at the conference, if you were just to run into Samy, it looked like he was wearing this sort of crystal pendant around his neck, but he would sort of surreptitiously flip a switch, and suddenly that crystal pendant would start to glow with a sort of neon like glow. And you'd ask him, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's my breath. It's in this." And what that was is a flexible, a super thin, flexible Tesla coil that is under his shirt. So it's probably something you shouldn't wear if you have a pacemaker. Um, and then the crystal, the little like pendant is actually a glass ampule that is holding it's a little evacuated chamber, sort of like a vacuum tube, that is holding his breath, and that's sitting on top of the Tesla coil. And Tesla coils can ignite neon tubes, so it's basically acting like a little neon tube. Like Sammy's got an amazing curiosity about the world, and he just was like going through and learning about stuff, and came onto this very beautiful piece of art
Yeah,
that
he
he
shared his
can wear.
journey starting with a big vacuum pump, everything from, making ice cream in it in a vacuum because you can,
Right,
right, the
right.
pressure and the temperature. And he talks about how he was looking for people who could train him in some of the glass blowing techniques, I believe it was,
Yes, yes.
and travels to Milwaukee just based on an email when he finally found someone, shows up at her house, knocks on the door. She's not there. He's like, I've already paid her for the training. I have a plane ticket to Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the middle of winter where it's freezing, and she's not there. So he calls her. Of course, she transposed two of the numbers, and she's 10 houses down.
He's down the
Um,
street.
but it was engaging. It was great, and it was really interesting. Like you said, his curiosity of how he went from project to project to project to get to that end result, that first ever wearable Tesla coil, was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. The challenge both at Sammy and Nick had of how do you pull a vacuum in a volume of something. It's you get these vacuum pumps you might see. Those will take you down to like maybe 1/10 or 100th atmospheric pressure. But if you need something that's like really a vacuum, that's hard. You need to get these really weird pumps that can kill themselves if you have a little bit of tiny impurities in the air that's running through them. And so it's a level of technique and technology that is just amazing.
The last one I wanted to ask you about, the video's not out yet because it was on the design lab stage, but tell me about Chris Combs' talk.
So Chris Combs is a artist who makes Blinky art things. Like it's stuff. It's like really refined versions of things that you've seen a lot of people do, but he's actually thinking about it from an artistic point of view, and he's in dialogue with a lot of the other artists, and he has taken the time to actually figure out how do you integrate this kind of technical art into normal art museums or art galleries. And so he's uh worked with these galleries, trying to get them to understand, trying to figure out that, like, oh, this is a thing that needs to be plugged in. Pictures on a wall don't have power requirements.
Right.
um, but his talk was really about how to sell your art. Like, if you a lot of us make cool little things, and we want to, like, maybe this would be useful to show off to people in an artistic way. It was also really nice to have this talk to a lot of people who might not consider the things they are making our art. It's like, but we all create all this stuff all the time, and so why don't you think of this as art? You just have to kind of recontextualize some of your creations and start to talk to other people who are doing similar things, and then it's art. But a lot of galleries don't quite know how to do this sort of stuff yet, and it's hard. And so he had like this nice sort of how-to guide almost of like what to do, how to look for the galleries that are amenable, how to talk to them when you find places, how to not give up, how to like how to present your pieces so that they are actually um people would actually want to bring them in onto a gallery, and have maybe, and like how much to charge for them, how many do you want to make of a thing? Do you want to make just one of a thing, or maybe, it's probably actually better if you make, like, say, 20 of a thing, because then it's a limited series, and people like limited series. They're able to say, oh, look, I'm 4 of 20. And so it was really nice, because a lot of my cohort, I feel, are have art tendencies, but there's no real path. Like, who do you talk to? You can't just, like, go to the Getty Art Museum and say, hey, hang my Blinky thing on the wall.
Right. This is art too.
But he presents a way that you can start the process of getting, if you want to express yourself more publicly. And I found that really nice, especially for the crowd that the Supercon is.
That's great. And speaking of the crowd, this was the first time since 2019 and the pandemic started that that SuperCon was in person. How was it to be back in person at a conference like that?
It was really nice, but I am so out of practice being amongst crowds of people. Yeah, it was very strange, because a lot of these people I see only on the internet. I see only via video calls. I don't or just chats on social media. I don't really see them in real life except during these types of conferences. And so it was very strange, because some of these people I had not seen since 2019, and because the last time I saw them was at SuperCon, it was almost as if nothing had happened in the last 3 years. It's like, hey, it's nice to see you again. I just saw you last week. Well, I mean, not last week, but last week, 3 years ago.
That's pretty cool that you can just pick up from where you were.
Yeah, but it was super exhausting for me, because I'm just not used to. I'm always tired out by lots of people, and to, like, have gone for like 3 years not really being around people, and then suddenly, like, people.
I bet. Well, thanks for taking the time to share how SuperCon went.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really great. I recommend anybody or everybody who's interested in this kind of stuff, go to the hackaday.com site, look for SuperCon links. We'll have a bunch in our show notes about the stuff we've been talking about, and when the videos come out, watch them. They're almost all, like, super super useful and super fun.
Yeah, they did a great job picking out speakers.
Agreed.
Well, we'll each leave you with one other news item this episode. My first one is Python in the browser. So if you think back to PyCon back this past April, the CEO of Anaconda, Peter Wang, announced PyScript. And PyScript allows you to run Python in the browser using PyIodide. PyIodide takes CPython and compiles it down to WebAssembly, so you can use it in a browser. The challenge is that's about an 11 meg download, right? We complain about large JavaScript downloads today. Well, 11 megs isn't going to fly. What's pretty cool is they were able to replace CPython with MicroPython and get that down to 300K, which is way smaller than a lot of JavaScript libraries. PyScript is a framework that you build on top of PyIodide, and now you just use the target of MicroPython instead, and now you can use Python right there in the browser. No JavaScript needed. I'm pretty excited about it. I use Python on the server side for a couple of my websites, but now you'll be able to reuse code, or, I think in my personal opinion, Python's a little easier to learn than JavaScript, and imagine that we can do that and how we can enable the education system using, cheaper computers, or if it's in a web browser, you can use mobile devices. It's, the possibilities are endless. Now, with that said, there's a lot of excitement. You can see my excitement, but it's still really, really early. Everything I read talks about that. And there's a great podcast this week. Listen to the Talk Python podcast with Michael Kennedy. He's got guests including Brett Cannon, Fabio Pliger, and Nicholas Tallervey, who was on the Circuit Python show earlier this year, who was a fantastic guest. But they go into the technical details of it. So if you want to learn more, listen to that. And sometime in the next year or two, I'm excited to see what PyScript's going to really look like in a browser.
Yeah, it's so crazy to you look at some of the PyScript examples, and it's like, oh, it's doing your sort of like basic sort of, here's how to do some initial little web, like dynamic web things. You do view source, and it's like your standard webby things of like linking to CSS and HTML body, and then the PyScript tag, and then Python.
Pure Python. And where it really gets exciting, if you think about it, not just education, but if you can include the data science tools like NumPy and SciPy,
Yeah.
right in a
Yeah.
browser where you can just
Yeah.
show and manipulate them. That could be pretty excited. And what is your last item for us today?
So more it's a Todd-tastic episode, this episode.
Wouldn't have it
So
any other way.
so was it, I guess in August, I made this little gizmo called the PicoStepSeq, which is a tiny MIDI step sequencer using these 8 lever switches that have built-in LEDs they're very popular on synthesizers and drum machines in the 1980s. And Adafruit had just started carrying them, and it was right before Circuit Python Day, and so 2 weeks before Circuit Python Day, I was like, I'm gonna see if I can build a sequencer using these switches and a Raspberry Pi Pico and a little OLED display and a rotary encoder, and I'm gonna like design the PCB, get it fabbed, write the firmware in Circuit Python, and design a little 3D printed case for it that looks very 80s style. And I did it. I was kind of surprised. It all just kind of fell together. I didn't make any major mistakes on the PCB, and the circuit was pretty simple. So there's a few things to mess up on. The Circuit Python was really quick to implement the ideas, even though if the timing for doing MIDI is a little loose in Circuit Python because there's no way of doing like things on a specific clock. Um, but it worked, and so that is the sort of the description of that is now an article in the Magpie magazine, which is the sort of official magazine of the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and so it's both on their website and in their print version. I'm very excited. I was trying to find how do I get a print version of this magazine in California? Like, is there a way? And I couldn't find a way, so I ordered one from their website in England. so I'll be getting at some point a physical magazine all the way from the UK.
Do I get to tease you that they called you an expert in MicroPython and not CircuitPython?
Yeah, it's
It
which is
happens.
hilarious because I know so little about MicroPython because they're actually quite different. If anyone has not played with either, there's a lot of overlap, but yeah, there's enough difference that it's hard to know sometimes what's going on.
So check out the Magpie. You can read the article online. Also check out John Park's workshop, the November 30th episode, where he demoed one right on video, so you can see it and
Oh,
hear
that's
it.
right. Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah,
great example.
we'll have that link in the show notes too. Yeah, it actually John Park is another call out because it was his little demo of the step switches that these lever switches that made me go, huh, I wonder if I can make a sequencer. So it was like a week previous. It was his what does he call it? John Park's Pick of the Week show that made me go, aha.
Got to get your inspiration from anywhere you can.
That's right. But also the Magpie magazine is totally free as a PDF download if you want to get the print version in PDF form. Um, you can donate to them because they are a foundation if you want. But yeah,
I recommend it. Well, that's our show. It was very Todd-tastic. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at The Bootloader or look for us on Mastodon. You can find Todd there, and I'm there as well. Until next time, stay positive.
bye.